we're going to use AncestryDNA to help you with your family history research questions when we come back. All right, well, welcome back to another episode on Genealogy TV. I am so glad you're here. Just a quick note, if you are our first time here, my name is Connie Knox. I am a lifelong genealogist here to help you go further, faster, and factually with your family research. Now, don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so that you get notified each time I upload a video. And also know that there is a Facebook page, a newsletter, and a website. Links for all of that stuff will be in the show notes below. And so we're going to jump into it right now. So we're going to talk about getting you up and running with your Ancestry DNA results. Now, this strategy can be used with any DNA results. It doesn't have to be Ancestry, but we're going to demonstrate it on Ancestry. And so we're going to jump into it right now. So what we're going to do is, I've got a PowerPoint presentation here, so I can't click through every little detail, but we're certainly going to give it a try. So here we go. All right, so when you are first logged into Ancestry, you can get to your cousin matches, which is the gold. This is where the answers to all your questions hopefully will be, is in the cousin matches. Now, ethnicity results are great. But they really don't help really fine-tune the answers to our ancestry questions, other than maybe some migration patterns and some ethnicity estimates, and kind of give us some clues, but it doesn't really help us absolutely define who our ancestors are. But we're going to get to that all here in just a moment. So we're going to be looking at the DNA cousin matches. There are a couple of ways that you can get to it. You can click on the DNA tab directly and hit this drop down where it says DNA matches. Also know that if you find yourself on the other DNA screen, like if you went to it straight from the DNA tab, you would also get to it from this center box right here where it says DNA matches, and then you can click through. Okay, we're not going to talk a lot about through lines today. We're just really focused on the DNA cousin matches, which is where the gold is. Okay, so step one is just really to define what your research question is. What is it that you want to know more about? And so with that in mind, you can move on to step two. And so as we're going through our progress here, step two is going to obviously be using the DNA cousin matches, but we're really looking at the fourth cousins or closer, and ideally first and second cousins. It just kind of depends on your research question. We'll talk more about that here in just a moment. But with all of our cousin matches, once we've clicked through to that, we get this list. Now, I've blocked out the names of some of these people here, but you'll get a list where all of your DNA cousins are kind of falling into different buckets. Now, Ancestry uses the parent-child bucket. They have the sibling bucket. They also have a first cousin bucket, a second cousin bucket, a third cousin bucket, and so on. It kind of depends on the DNA that you have with your cousins. So we've got this list here. I've kind of filtered it. I just scrolled down basically to just the first and second cousins. It's about all I could fit on the screen at the moment. And so really, if we can use our first and second cousins, you're going to have best chance of success with this strategy. But we can do this with third and fourth cousins as well. It just takes a little bit more work. So in looking at our first cousin and second cousin, you can see the buckets on the left-hand side here. Here's the first cousin and the second cousin. But really, once you start getting into the list, you start to see that it's giving you a range, first and second cousin, and it shows you the trees, and if they are showing a common ancestor, well, what that means is that you have it in your tree, they have it in their tree, and it's showing you that there's a common ancestor there. Down here, you can see where there's a lock on this tree. That means it's a private tree. That doesn't stop you from contacting that cousin, though, and asking them for more information. So as we now move on to our next step, we're really going to start kind of identifying one side of the family from another. And this is where you can really kind of focus your efforts with your family DNA cousins. And we're going to divide the family tree up into a couple different groups. Now, we're going to also use, Ancestry has a really powerful color coding system that you can customize to help mark these different cousins in such a way that you can really kind of filter down. So let's take a look at the family tree for a moment. This is the ancestral view. You're at the bottom and your parents, and then your grandparents and your great-grandparents, okay? And so what we want to do is you could do one of a couple things. You could divide your family, your cousin DNA matches, into your father's side versus your mother's side, or you could do all 4 grandparents. So you would actually have 4 groups, each with a different grandparent. And along the way, you could color code your grandparents or your father's side and your mother's side if you only have 2 groups. This is really ideal for helping people with missing parentage, people who are adopted or trying to find their biological family, any kind of ancestry research question. If you've taken a DNA test, this is where the gold is at. This is really what you want to do to help your research further, okay? All right, so let's pretend for a moment we're trying to solve for our paternal grandfather, all right? So I put a big question mark on this guy, all right? So if we're trying to find him, then what we want to do using our cousin matches is we want to separate out our cousin matches from one side of the family to the other. So what we do is we then take a look at our cousin matches, and I'm going to show you how to do this here in a second. We're going to take your cousin matches and you're going to identify this family. Well, how do you do that? If you're trying to solve for this grandfather, what you're going to do is you're going to be looking at the descendants of this grandfather. And so let's pretend for a moment that this grandfather and grandmother have had children. And so these would be, in this scenario, would be your aunts and uncles. Well, those people have had children, and those people have become, basically, those are your first cousins, right? So knowing that, keep this in mind, and this is a very simplistic graph here, but this works with second cousins and third cousins. But keep in mind that these first cousins have these grandparents in common, okay? So these are your common ancestors for you and your first cousins, okay? This would also be the same thing if you were trying to solve for a great-grandparent. Then the common ancestor would be with your second cousins and your great-grandparents, okay? So the common ancestors in this scenario are your grandparents. And one of the quick ways to remember this, I have a trick that I just, in my head, I was trying to figure out a way that I could remember this quickly. So I count the G's. Grandparent being 1 G, great-grandparent being 2 G's, great and grandparent, right? So if it's 2 G's, that's your second cousins that are going to have a great-grandparent in common. First cousins, 1 G for a grandparent. So that's a quick and dirty way to figure it out. So if you are cousin matches with somebody who is a third cousin, then you're going to have a great-grandparent in common. You may not know who they are yet, but that's a simplistic way. Now, when you start getting into half siblings and pedigree, collapse with cousins marrying cousins and such, it can get a little more complicated. But this is a simplistic view and a simplistic trick to remembering it. So now we're going to move on to step 4, which is separating the cousins along family lines. Okay? So now we know what our research question is. We know we have an understanding of what cousins we're going after. We're going to separate these cousins out along these family lines. Now, one of the next things that you need to understand is with these cousins, let me back up just for a second. I'm going to explain this example with a real life situation. This is my first cousin once removed, Carol. She's kindly allowed me to use her image and name to help me explain this. She is first cousins with my father. I am the child of my father, therefore the once removed. So first cousin once removed, the removed part, if you're not familiar with it, just simply means generational difference. So my daughter, for example, would be first cousin twice removed, okay? So Carol and I have a common ancestor. Herman Miller Madsen is my great-grandfather, but is Carol's grandfather because she's one generation closer to Herman than I am, okay? All right, so here's Carol in the cousin list, okay? And she's falling into the second cousin bucket, and as you can see at the top, but she's really the first cousin once removed, so I just want to make sure that everybody was clear on that. And so when I click on Carol from the list of cousin matches, the screen comes up and it looks like this. And it shows us that we are 464 centimorgans apart, and it gives us some more information. It shows us that Herman Miller Madsen is the common ancestor along with his wife Frances. And so the real gold here is clicking on the Shared Matches tool. So now I know that Carol is in the Madsen line because Herman and Frances Madsen are our common ancestors. So I'm going to mark Carol as being a Madsen descendant, right? So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, all right, I want to look at all of the cousins that Carol and I have in common, because all of those DNA cousins are going to be Madsen descendants, okay? So if I click on that, now I have a filtered list of just Madsen descendants, okay? And I can go through, and as you can see here, I've already marked a few of them with the Madsen color coding system, and I'll show you how that works. So basically what you do is you click on the little plus and you add a group. Now if you've never done this before, you wouldn't have anybody here, and what you would do is you would click on this create custom group plus button, and you would be able to open it up and add your own group. So maybe you want to just go father's side and mother's side and just have two groups because you don't know, maybe you don't know who your father is. So you're trying to figure out who that is. Well, if you can identify somebody on your mother's side and then use the Shared Matches tool like we're doing here, then you can mark everybody that's on your mother's side. And then when you unfilter it, everybody that's left that doesn't have a mark next to them as being on your mother's side, they've got to be on your father's side, okay? Now in this case, I'm using my 4 grandparents, okay? So I have created these groups with the 4 grandparents, and I've actually gone a little bit farther on another line. But as you can see, I'm marking all of these DNA cousins that I have in common with Carol, and I'm marking them as Madsen, that have Madsen ancestors in their families, in their DNA. So what I've done is I've color-coded all 4 of my grandparents. These Glenn and Beverly are my parents, and then Glenn Curry at the top and Elma are my grandparents on my father's side, and Ellsworth and Helen are my grandparents on my mother's side. And so I have created a group, as you can see here, for each one of them. And so I have, I can go through and I can do the same thing on the unfiltered cousin list, and I can say, okay, wait a minute. I know one of these cousins is on my Henley side of the family. So then I hit that Shared Matches tool, I drill into that cousin, hit the Shared Matches tool, and I get all of the cousins that we have in common, because I know that DNA cousin with me is on the Henley side, because I know that to be a Henley cousin. So then I can take everybody in that list and I can mark them as Henley, 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 and I can mark them all down. Then I unfilter the list, and I can go back and I can say, all right, now I want to do all the Madsons. And so I find that cousin Carol, who I know to be on the Madsen side of the family, and I click on her. I hit the Shared Matches tool. I filter that list all the way down to just people that are in common with me and Carol, and I mark them all as Madsen, 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 all the way down to third or fourth cousins until I get sick of doing it. And then you don't need to go beyond fourth cousins. And then I do it again. I unfilter it. I go back to the full list, unfiltered cousin list, and I say, all right, now who have I got left? Some of these other cousins I may not know, because I don't know much about my Booth side of the family, and I can kind of drill into some of these other cousins that are not marked, and I can go, okay, wait a minute, this guy's got Booth in his surname. He's got to be on the Booth side. I can do that a couple times just to verify. And if it's something like Smith, everybody's got Smith on all sides of their family, right? But Booth is a little bit unique, so I can then go in and I can focus on a couple of the cousins that have Booths in their surnames and click on them, and then drill into them, hit Shared Matches, and mark them all as Booths. And I can do the same with the Simmons line and so on. So by the time I'm done, some of my cousins might have multiple dots next to them. Here you can see, while I've blocked out their names, my sisters here have multiple dots because they're descendants of all four grandparents, right? You can also click on the little button here that has the little paper and add notes while you're in the cousin match level. Also pay attention to the filtering. So all of these across the top here are filters. In this page, I had them filtered down to just the Madsen line, so pay attention to what you're filtering. And then you can hit the back button at the top of the screen to go back and unfilter everything, or you can click this down arrow right here, and at the bottom of the list there is a reset button, and you can unfilter everything there. So now we're back to the list that is unfiltered, and you can see all the different dots here. Okay, so now what do? Now we've organized our DNA list by the different lines in the tree to the best of our ability. And it might be you're not sure, so you might want to leave it unmarked. But in step 5 here, what we do is we take those shared matches and we filter it back down to what our research question was. So we were originally looking for that paternal grandfather, so we might filter that list back down to just that line, and then start digging into those cousin matches and looking at their trees, looking at their profiles, digging into their trees and looking at their sources, looking at the records that are there, and see if there are any clues. Now you should also be reaching out to some of these better quality contacts. Now people that have 2 people in their tree is not going to help you a lot, but some of these cousins are going to have a lot of people in their tree. You can contact them and pay attention to the surnames that are in their trees. All right, so if we're on the page where Carol and I were together on the page, it's going to show you a tree. You can drill into the tree in the green areas because Carol and I both have ancestors in our tree. This isn't Carol's tree. This is actually somebody else's, but it shows you who the common ancestors are over here. It also shows you how they line up in the tree. And we can also message somebody from the message button. It's at the top of the screen in the upper right corner. You can expand this tree and really dig into their tree, and with a couple clicks of the expand button you can get down into what looks like the regular ancestry tree. So you can drill into the tree and then really kind of dig into each of the profiles of some of the people you're researching, see if they have any more records or any more resources that you don't have. You should also pay attention to the surnames. Now, I'm back on this page with Carol, and at the bottom, if you scroll down, at the bottom it shows you the shared match, the shared surnames, which in this case was Matson, but it also shows you Carol's surnames that are in her tree that I might not have. All right, so now, hopefully, that has given you some modicum of success, and you have found some new research tools, maybe some new family members, some new records, some new trees, some new cousins that you didn't know before. This is where the gold is at. This is where you can really make some progress with your research by using the shared cousin matches. And just to kind of recap the 5 steps again, first step is just to figure out what it is that you want to research. Second step is to review the cousin matches in its entirety, unfiltered. The third step is to identify one side of the family by using a cousin match that you know or you suspect is on one line or the other that you're researching. And then the step 4 is to separate those cousins along family lines using the color coding system, the shared matches tool. You're going to drill in to those cousins and then mark all of those cousins with the color coding system. And then step 5 is to research the filtered cousin matches on the line specific to your research question and see if you can find more in the trees, more by contacting the cousins, and also by digging into some of the records. There's a lot of things you can do there. So if you don't find success with this, keep trying. You may have to wait for more cousin matches to show up. And you know, you can consider uploading your DNA to GEDCOM. I've got another video about how to download your raw DNA from Ancestry. You can then upload it to another service like GEDmatch or MyHeritage or some of the other services. If you upload it to places like MyHeritage and a couple of the other places, you may have to pay for that service. GEDmatch is free. There is some higher level paid parts of GEDmatch, but I believe for the basic level you can upload for free. And please make sure you set it to be used by law enforcement. And so, well, that's it. I mean, you can upload to other services and cast a wider net if you are not getting enough cousin matches. Now, if you're doing this on another service, other than Ancestry, you might consider using Ancestry because they're going to have more cousin matches. They got a bigger database than anybody else out there. And if you don't have an AncestryDNA kit, I'll leave an affiliate link in the show notes below if you want to consider getting an AncestryDNA kit. I really have had tremendous success using this technique over and over and over again to help my clients and to help others find their family history. So that's kind of it. I hope that helps. You know, there's more videos on the screen right now for you that are based around the DNA theme at Ancestry, and well, it is time for you to go find your ancestors. So until next time, keep on climbing your family tree.